Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm John Pinecker with the Mohave Valley Daily News. Over the next couple hours, we're going to be doing a couple of interviews. One with Mike Gannuscio, the candidate for Mohave County Sheriff, and another one with Doug Schuster, and we'll be posting those for everyone. A couple of key dates I wanted to talk to you about. Right now, today's the 21st. The Bullhead City Library is open for early voting. In Kingman, you can go to the Catherine Heidenreich Adult Center, and in Lake Havasu, the Lake Havasu Library. Mail-in ballots at all three places. You can still request mail-in ballots until this Friday, the 24th. Bullhead City is asking that you have them in the mail by July 27th. In Kingman, they're asking that you have it in by the 29th. I think the earlier the better, just to be sure. And then, of course, Election Day is August 4th. So we have a few questions. We're going to try and keep this short and sweet. Please stick with us. First, Mike, thanks for coming. We appreciate having you here.
Thanks for having me.
If you can just start with kind of give us your background, your philosophy on law enforcement, anything else that you think is important regarding your career in law enforcement.
You know, my background, it's pretty diversified. I started out as a heavy equipment mechanic, welder, fabricator, when I moved here from California about 20 years ago. And I moved to Arizona because I wanted the Arizona way of life. I got tired of the politics in California.
Absolutely.
And I moved to Meadview, and I ran my parents' construction company with them up there until about 2006, and my parents were retiring, and I got into the sheriff's office. I went through the academy there, and I became a resident deputy of Meadview, Arizona. And from 2006 to about 2013, right around there, I got hurt as a deputy in a training incident. I had all the ligaments on my elbow got torn, and I had to have surgery. And after the surgery, I wound up in the evidence room. And it wasn't the job for me being stuck inside. And, you know, I took a cut and pay to be a cop because I wanted to be a cop and I didn't want to be an evidence guy. So I went in and I talked to Tom Sheehan and told him, you know, I really appreciate you letting me have this job, but I don't feel that the evidence room's for me. And there was no prediction of when I could actually go back to patrol full time because my arm didn't want to straighten out. And I didn't want to be a liability on the county. So I left my job there at the sheriff's office and started my own company. So since I left the sheriff's office in the last 8 years, I started a trucking company. I've got a feed store out in Golden Valley. I've got a ranch at the north end of Kingman, and I've got a farm down in Parker. So we do pretty good. You know, we have a lot of fun with our company. We sponsor a lot of the Mohave County stuff. We sponsor the rodeos and the livestock associations, whatever we can give back to the community. So it does help, and it feels good. You know, it's nice to support my community with what we do now. So.
Absolutely, and you're a businessman, so you know how to run businesses.
I am.
And manage people.
I export. I sell my product all over the world, all over the country. So there's a lot of business involved, a lot of financials involved in it. Yes.
So you talked about Meadview, and one of the issues that we've heard a lot about is that we're not properly staffed in some of the more rural areas. From the sheriff's department, do you believe that we're staffed at an appropriate level? And if not, what do you think we're lacking? How can we get there? What would be your plan to get to those?
You know, we can always use more deputies. You know, it's never. I'm never going to say that we can't. We don't need 40, but we could use a few more. But we have more deputies now than we've ever had in the existence of the sheriff's office. And you know, we had 10 deputies less. Actually, I think we had a few more than that less when I was a deputy, and we had coverages in all these areas. Tom Sheehan was adamant about that happening, and I was one of the guys that had to go fill that slot in one of the rural areas. It was a must. It was going to happen, so off I went. And since I've left the sheriff's office, and I really wasn't involved in the law enforcement of it because I missed it a lot, and I had to sever all my ties with it. Since I got back into it after I had my burglary and kind of got woken up with it, I found out we don't have any deputies in the rural areas. I've got a feed store out in Golden Valley, and you know, I have all my customers come in and they all say, we don't have any deputies out here anymore. No one ever has deputies. So, then I talk to my folks out in Meadview and some friends of mine in Dolan Springs, and they say the same thing. We haven't had deputies out here for about 3 years unless there's a call for service. So, I know we always have a low. About every 5 years we lose a bunch of deputies because we don't have programs to retain them. But we can change that. I have plans for programs to retain the deputies at no cost to the county. It's just a management thing. And as far as having deputies in the rural areas, it is a must, but that also is a management thing. We did it before with less, and now we have more. So there's really no excuse not to be having it now, all the way down to, enforcing and helping out state trust and the BLM lands down in Havasu that we just can't seem to give them a hand with all the campers.
So more of an allocation problem than a numbers problem.
I just feel it's a management issue, and I can change it.
Great. What is the single biggest problem facing our county that the sheriff's department should be or could be helping with, and how would you change things?
Well, the two biggest things is body cameras and rural coverage are the two biggest things, in my opinion. And the body cameras, I already have a package for it, and I know the sheriff got his plan too, but mine was $1.2 million cheaper over 5 years. So, which falls back into the business end of it. I am a businessman. Sheriff Schuster's he's never been in business, not successfully anyway. He's just been a law enforcement officer his entire career. So I do bring a different aspect into it with me. But managing, putting the rural guys out there and still maintaining what we have in our bigger areas and putting body cams on every one of our deputies is our biggest thing right now.
Is a body camera thing, is that to help with prosecution, or is it to just kind of, what is serving the need for, or what is causing the need for body cameras, in your opinion?
Well, some of the greatest things for the body cameras is, and we'll just start with the use of them. So if you have deputies on calls and they need more information, but they know they're going to have to drive back to the scene because they forgot something or overlooked something, they can pull their camera and they can review the footage, which saves time, and it's a refresher for them. Two is, complaints with agencies across the country. They're expensive, and it's a one-sided thing. It's either they believe you or they believe the deputy. The camera shows transparency. So if you look at other agencies, even in Arizona, they've dropped their figures from 7 figures, 6 figures to 4 figures because it shows who's actually being honest with it. But it keeps it honest on both ends. If you know that you're being recorded, you're not as apt to say, hey, this guy did this to me. And the same thing, the deputy's actually more apt to do a better investigation because if a complaint comes in, it's going to get reviewed, and he can get schooled for that to make sure that he does better for the next round. And it'll be a good training thing too, because we can go through the footage and go, hey, we could have done it this way better. It's all around better.
Good. Sounds good. Well, let's roll into something where the body cameras might have been good. Was Sheriff Schuster said that he would stand with the BLM protesters in Kingman as long as they stayed peaceful. What are your thoughts on the BLM movement? Would you have stood with them?
No. I believe in peaceful protest, and if somebody wants to peaceful protest, that's for them to do. It's not a law enforcement officer's job to stand with them. That's their thing. We're just there to protect and serve. So getting involved with it, I don't agree with, and I don't agree with getting involved with any entity that causes hate, wants to defund police or anyone else for that matter. We're supposed to be a neutral party just to make sure that the peace is kept and nothing more. We're not there to stand behind things like that. It's not acceptable as far as I'm concerned.
Well, let me follow up on that. Do you see anything positive coming from the protests and the equality movement around the nation?
Well, there's always some positives that come from any protest that's got merit behind it, but there's also negative things that come with it too. You look at the BLM protests that go on, and you see how far they've gone. When you start going back toward the Midwest, it's out of control. I do believe in peaceful protest, but when it gets to the point where they're breaking the law, hurting people, I'm not wanting to be involved with it all, other than to keep the peace and help people that are affected by what they're doing.
Very good. All right, let's talk about everybody's favorite topic, the masks and stay-at-home orders and all that coronavirus stuff. The sheriff came out and said he would not enforce the governor's stay-at-home executive order. How do you feel about your responsibility as sheriff to enforce the executive orders?
Well, if there's an executive order that's lawful, then it does need to be enforced, but it needs to pertain to everybody, as long as it doesn't affect somebody's civil rights or constitutional rights. You can't enforce that. You're sworn to oath. Mm-hmm. So if it violates anyone's constitutional rights, I wouldn't enforce it. I can't, as no other law enforcement officer should. It's what we swore an oath to.
But and this is some of the muddied water, is that per the state's constitution, so the sheriff is sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Arizona. The state's constitution says that the governor has the right to do this, as long as he's declared a state of emergency. How do you balance, or who makes that decision on whether the governor has made a lawful constitutional order? Is that up to you, or is that something that you have to make your decision and you'll let the chips land where they may, or what are your thoughts?
And you said it right there. It is a decision that anyone in office would have to make. You have to sit back, weigh the pros and cons with it. But you look at the order we have now, and it's against our federal constitution. Even if he does have the right to do it, it's still against the Constitution. So I just, and it is a case by case basis of what you're going to uphold versus what the people want. And I don't feel this is one of those.
Okay. All right. Last question. See, painless, right? Why do you want to be sheriff? I'm sure you've been asked this 100 times now. Why do you want to be sheriff?
Why do I want to be sheriff? I want to make a difference. When I was a deputy, I became a deputy because I wanted to make a difference. And I've come a long way since I was first hired as a deputy sheriff. I have a pretty big business, and I've expanded my mind quite a bit since then. But I want to be sheriff because I live in a rural area, just like most people do, and that are in the county, and we're all feeling the hardship of it, and I can do it. I know I could do this job with no issues, and I have backing to come with me that will make sure that it happens the way that it should happen. But my goal is to make sure that we take care of everybody equally, and we're not right now. We can't have all of our deputies in one area and forget about other areas. So I want to be sheriff to make sure that it happens. There's no financial gain in it really for me. I've hired employees to take my place, so it's not like I'm doing it for the money. I don't need the money. I need to make the difference. I want my neighborhood safe. I want my representation done the way that it should be done. I want the same representation that somebody would get a mile from the sheriff's office versus 25 miles from the sheriff's office. It needs to be the same all the way to the Arizona Strip. There's lots of places that want change, and I'm going to stand up for them, make sure it happens. I want to start citizen action committees in every area. We need to go back to a non-traditional law enforcement theme. We need community policing, and getting the community back involved with that will help bring our crime rate down lower. It'll help the citizens build the trust back with law enforcement and bring them back together. And citizens like to be involved with the sheriff's office. It's a good feeling inside when they say, hey, I got to go do something with the guys today. And we need them. We need all the help that we can get, no matter where it's at. You start the committees, you go to them every month. You talk to the residents of each individual area and say, hey, what's working? What's not? Let them have a voice with the sheriff's office instead of trying to call on the phone, because you can't. you can't get calls back. Everywhere I go, it's the same thing. They never call me back. I can't get a hold of anybody. Message left. Well, if we go to meetings every month, there won't be any reason for the phone calls not kept, because they're going to see us in a matter of time anyway, and they can voice those concerns so we can make changes.
And I have to answer you in person now.
That's right, and I don't mind.
All right. If you want to take a couple minutes and talk directly to the voters with your closing thoughts.
All right. Well, closing thoughts. You know, we've got a lot going on in our country, and people across the country are screaming for change all the way down to our local areas. And August 4th is the chance that you can make that change. If you want somebody that's going to be directly involved with each one of our communities and split it up where our communities can have a voice and talk to everyone in the sheriff's office from the top down, and have a sheriff that'll be on the streets in every area to help make sure that everybody knows what's going on and to keep our communities safe. Mike Gannuscio, August 4th. We'll make that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Get out and vote. August 4th.
August 4th. Make that vote.